Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Securely Transitioning Workloads to the Cloud, sponsored by Micro Focus. My name is Carol, author of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Jim Bird, SANS analyst, and Satya Divadari, CyberRes Cloud CTO at Micro Focus. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to turn the webcast over to our presenters.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jim Bird. I'm a SANS analyst, and I'm one of the authors of the paper that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing the findings of a survey that we've done on secure DevOps and cloud security. I'm, as a quick introduction to me, I'm the author of a couple of courses, or co-author of a couple of courses on secure DevOps and cloud security at SANS, and some books on secure DevOps and agile security for O'Reilly. As well, I was, until recently, I'm just retired as the CTO of a global financial trading platform. One of my responsibilities as CTO was to run the cybersecurity and other security programs for that organization. So Satya, would you please introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are as well? Thanks.
Hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, or good night, wherever you are from. So this is Satyavathi Divadari. I'm the cloud CTO from Micro Focus. I take care of solutions around cloud across all the pillars of cybersecurity. Before joining Micro Focus, I worked in finance companies like Wells Fargo and consulting companies like Capgemini, Cognizant, IBM, and Tata Consultancy Limited. So I do have a wide experience of cybersecurity. Today, I'm looking forward to discuss with you on the DevSecOps journey. Looking forward for the discussion. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you. All right, well, let's get into the paper. The survey results are available on the SANS site. You can download it. There's a link here. And the theme of our paper, we were looking at security as the future of security as code. So we wanted to look into issues around code in security, code in cloud operations, and in development as well. So we'll be looking at we're using that as a lens for the study. Where we started was in the first looking at the cloud landscape, and one of the things interesting finding was that we're seeing an increasing focus for cloud security amongst organizations. So the majority, almost 2/3 of the respondents that are in the security area indicate that they're spending at least half their time on public cloud security and on cloud operational responsibilities. And that's a significant increase just from last year, right? So already we're seeing a much larger switch over to focus on cloud security for everybody. And that leads us to our first question for Satya. All right, as organizations move from on-premise infrastructure to cloud-based services, all kinds of complexities around development, operations, and underlying risks increase. What are the trends that you're observing, or what are you seeing with the organizations that you're working with?
So I think, as you just mentioned in the research, Jim, more than 2/3 of organizations are already onto cloud, and out of that, half of them are using multiple cloud platforms. That's the trend which we are observing. However, that was not an intentional trend in the earlier times. It was either because a company acquired another company, or then due to the merger, they end up having multiple cloud platforms. That was the initial way the organizations are having multiple cloud platforms. Now what we have also, another trend is that some of the business units go ahead and purchase a particular service very interesting on a different platform. And that's how another way how organizations ended up with multiple cloud platforms. However, what we are observing today in the recent times is organizations are deliberately planning cloud strategy. Okay, let's say, okay, AWS for business applications, for development I'll use Azure, or maybe for mail applications I'll use G Suite. So this is the way they are planning. It's an intentional development and deployment of workloads based on this strategy. So that is something as a trend which we are observing. However, the span might be smaller right now, but that's the trend which is observed in the market and in the upcoming generation.
All right. Well, that's actually the next point that we highlighted in the study. So we found more than half of the organizations using 3 or more cloud platforms, and as you point out, some of them to do with mergers and acquisitions. Some of them are going for best of breed, and of course, what we're seeing too is that the largest organizations are conscious of systemic risk, so they want to avoid cloud vendor lock-in. So as you said, Satya, part of their more strategic thinking here. So not just looking for the best service available, but also trying to make sure that they don't put their too many eggs in that one basket, whether it's AWS or Google or Azure or some other cloud platform. So as we move into multiple cloud providers, they're facing all kinds of challenges with keeping up with consistency and compliance. What are the challenges in a multi-cloud environment that you're seeing, and how can they overcome these barriers or challenges?
So when it comes to multi-cloud platforms, I think developers are facing challenges. While the platform is different, then the interfaces are different, and the operating system, the way in which they built in is different. So because of which the code need to be changed multiple times. That's the major challenge for the developers. That requires actually a redesigning of the code or functionality development to what we can say interact with them, right? That's the challenge observed by the developers. So in order to do that, I know the solution as such is like how they are addressing this is actually by using the container packing platforms, right? So it is like you build and configure and deploy, or actually build, deploy, and then use it as a the code on that, right? So there are various tools available like Terraform, Kubernetes, and Docker, etc., which actually offer configuration and provisioning across multiple platforms. So which is actually a platform neutral application where you actually build your entire underlying infrastructure, for example, operating system, middleware, and then storage, everything is configured. And then over and above that, you actually load the code. So when you deploy, so everything goes in actually in a tandem, right? So that is the way that the what we can say the multi-cloud deployment has been used. So this helps actually the developers as well as the operations to simplify and streamline the development efforts across multiple cloud platforms. It also actually increases efficiency of development as well as deployment and also the resources who are working on these cases. Yeah, so that's the key. However, there are various challenges. The challenges are like, how do you maintain, how do you manage these templates? And then these are only visible, initially what you see is the efficiency and productivity improvement. However, the issues are visible only when an issue arises. The issue could be with the deployment, then you will figure out, is it because of the template error, or is it because of the way the platform works, right? So that is the major challenge which people face while the infrastructure is deployed as a code.
Yes, very good points. You're right. So it's tooling like containers, Terraform, these types of tools, across platform tools and languages certainly will help reduce some of the risk and complexity. What about from the standpoint of the security and risk management team? So assessing risk across multiple platforms, right? So if you look at that and say, all right, even though we're going to use common tools, there's still a fair learning challenge, right, for security and risk management teams to understand the different platforms. And do you have any, I don't know, suggestions, guidance about what to avoid, what to look for there in that space?
So, so more than the, each, for example, each cloud platform, when they design, they come up with their own USP, right? The strong points and strong interfaces. So which actually adds into a terrain of, innovation. Yes, good. On the negative side, the risk of not able to move between the platforms. That's the challenge. So when you are making a template which is actually completely a product neutral, vendor neutral, you still need to figure out what if this is deployed on AWS, or what if this is deployed on Azure. So those elements also need to be concerned, added into the configuration and managed. Otherwise, it's complicated. Another issue is like using a configuration which is not secure. That's one thing. And when you are using those images, what if that image is actually outdated, unpatched version of OS image, right? And what if the application what you are adding is actually completely buggy code, right? So those are the kind of risk which comes along with this automated deployments. And whenever you are deploying, you are not deploying one system, right? It's multiple systems, which means the risk is actually cascaded, and it is actually giving a what you can say cascading effect. That is the major problem which we observe.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, organizations trying to use multiple platforms to reduce risk also end up increasing risk, right? So it's a balancing
Yes.
act, right? So let's take a look at cloud configuration through code. So one of the things that we wanted specifically to understand is that cloud configuration is a major activity, right? You're going to create new services. You need to configure the whole service stack. And you can do this through the point and click interfaces, right, which are different in each platform. Or you can do it through code, and again, using maybe a cross-platform tool set like Terraform or something. So the whole idea of infrastructure as code, right, to programmatically configure the environment, the cloud environment, simplifies and abstracts working with the infrastructure. But one of the things we were surprised by was that only 1/3 of organizations have automated their cloud configuration through code and through the platform APIs. So that means that we're looking at approximately right now 2/3 of the organizations still doing things manually, right? So in terms of configuring all these different services. And I know that, when you start setting up a new service on Amazon as an AWS, for example, or Azure or something, it's there's a number of different factors you have to consider in the configuration. So let's take a look at these questions about infrastructure as code. So we know that making cloud configuration and code increases the velocity of the cloud deployments, right? Because you can do this, you can automate it, you can put it into build chains. But any small mistake in configuration could lead to all kinds of problems, right? The entire infrastructure being exposed. So let's talk about the risks associated with automation. Like, there's good sides to it, obviously, but what are the risks, and how can you resolve and manage these risks?
I think that's a valid analysis you have done, Jim. Appreciate that. The key point is, I think, as you rightly said, so when you are doing something at scale, right? So even though it's a small mistake, it actually gets multiplied and the amplified. So that's why the configuration or securing the configuration of the information infrastructure as a code is very important. I'll quote 3 risks. I know there are many risks, but I'll just quote 3 risks to discuss here. First one is securing the IAC template and securely maintaining and managing the configuration of the IAC itself, right? So ensuring that the configuration what is there is actually not tampered with. That's one. And second is, whenever you are doing that, are there any vulnerabilities within that code what you are listing down? And also checking out whether you are using some kind of additional application which also vulnerable. So these are the key things which comes into factor, for example, for the configuration element. The solution for this risk is to scan the ILC templates for vulnerable configuration, and also check the image for image and maintain the template. Once you actually fixed it, maintain the template securely so that nobody tampers it. So that's for the risk one. Second one is storing secrets, right? So when you are automating, there's a chance that you actually also loaded your secrets in, that's passwords, etc., which is not the safe way of coding, right? Any coding, you shouldn't be actually embedding the secrets in. Okay, then what is the alternative ways? Okay, let me put it in a text file and store it in a GitHub, or store it in a S3 bucket and then call it through the API call. Is it a better way? No, that's another risk, right? So you actually, we're exposing the image as well as the secrets out to the public. So these are the practices which actually increases the risk of the infrastructure itself, because anybody else can deploy using these secrets on your own cloud and you don't even know it's actually happening, right? That's one. And what is the solution for it? There are secure password walls available for storing the application secrets. And whenever you are writing the IAC, at that time you will call those APIs through APIs rather than actually passing the secret. You actually pass the API through which the access will be happening, or using the tokenization. So those are the mechanisms through which you can do the automation rather than embedding the secrets or storing the secrets in unencrypted way, right? So third one is actually drifts in configuration. So this is like, for example, there is a situation where one of the operation team observed there is a problem and they went ahead and did the changes directly in the production environment, whereas the template is not changed. The template has a different configuration, but what is in the production is completely different. This means whenever you are doing a redeployment or you are trying to do it again, then there is what we can see there is a change between the configuration template versus what is actually in the live, right? So that's a risk again coming, resulting in cloud drifting and resulting in security posture because of these what we can say the intermediary change which happened, right? So how you can manage this this risk is actually continuously monitoring the cloud infrastructure and also IAC to validate whether we are in line with the template. Are there any changes, so that could be addressed very quickly and you are not losing what we can say a lot of deployments unseen, right? So that is the third one. So I know there are many other risks, but just to simplify, those are the three.
Right, that's already quite a few to actively manage. Exactly, yes. And so, you look at some of these, the challenge of continuously monitoring your configuration, right, and keeping it in line with your code. That's a big challenge all by itself, right? So we're talking about things like cloud security posture management solutions or something like this, right? Will help you assist on that, right? I know that just trying to do this manually, again, creates a big load and it's very error prone, right?
I agree.
So certainly an opportunity for automation there, right, as well. All right, well, then let's keep going here. And let's talk about some more things. Now, one of the other aspects that we wanted to take a look at was velocity, the velocity of change, the velocity of risk. What we've done for the last several years is ask organizations what the velocity of deployment is, right? And we've done a year-over-year comparison. Let's just look back from 2017 to now. We're seeing that there's almost a 15% increase in velocity in the last 5 years, and that's the velocity of deployment. And that 75% of organizations are delivering changes to production more than once a month. We just picked more than once a month because back at a certain point in time, let's say back in the early 2000s, radical agile organizations were making changes, right? Introducing Scrum and extreme programming, and they were able to deliver working software, and maybe not even into production necessarily, but they were able to deliver working software in once a month and then maybe once every 2 weeks. that was considered radical, leading edge, absolutely outside. Now, leading edge is 15,000 times a minute or whatever it is that Amazon's doing or something like this, right? So we know that the velocity is increasing, and this is going to introduce a whole bunch of new challenges and risks for security organizations. One of the aspects of this is we wanted to look at programming language risks, right? Development. And we're seeing that as things are speeding up and as organizations are moving into the cloud, more in the cloud, their programmers are adopting different kinds of languages, in particular scripting languages, right? So we're talking about Python, JavaScript, languages like this, that Perl, right? Groovy, Ruby. These languages are much easier to take up. They are much faster. You can do much faster and dynamic development, but they come with some new risks, right? We have, sometimes there's not as much tooling support for them, right? So if you're looking at things like static analysis or other types of analysis, right? You something like Java or .NET is very well established tools and guidelines. People are trained in secure programming; they know what to do. If you're going to try to pick up some new language that hot new language that's very easy to learn, it's difficult for security organizations to understand the risk. And this language risk needs to be identified and managed. So specifically with dynamic languages, right, scripting languages, we're saying that several of these modern scripting languages were invented recently. In fact, apparently in the last 3 years. Developers rely a lot on open source libraries because there's a big stack of libraries and frameworks that are available. Third-party scripts and functions that are easy to deploy. So this is great from a development perspective, but it adds all kinds of unsafe coding risks, right? So how can these risks be managed and resolved?
Yeah, so before I answering, I'll just give a comment
Sure.
To what you mentioned, right?
Sure.
See, I think the latest scripts like, Next.js, React.js, and Python, all these are coming, anything I think in 1 or 2 years time. So, what they focus on is how to make the development developer friendly, So that's what it is all about. So how to make it development friendly? It's easy that you click there and you get the function. You type here, I'll give you a script. And what is the function you are looking for? This is the script. So developers actually rarely, not everybody, but rarely need to do everything. Most of the functions are already being built within these modern scripting languages. And for cloud and the topic of the day, velocity of what you can say, the deployments and developments, what's happening. So that is what the developers are using today. So with that speed in mind, it's not just because developers are available, it's because these languages are actually giving, the speed at which people are looking for. Right now, for everything, there is an app, right? For checking the health, there is an app. For checking your bank account, there is an app. For everything, there is an app, and each app is actually measured by few nanoseconds. That requires agile development. So that means actually it requires very fast development, right? So that's where these developers come up with, modern techniques of using third-party libraries, open source libraries, etc. I don't actually say anything against them, because that's how we are accelerating. That's how these innovations are coming up, right? So coming to the risk portion of it. So what is the risk here? The risk here is that lot of open source libraries, there are third-party applications are being used, while these script-based languages are being used a lot. So that's the challenge for the current security team as well as the production, because any risk that comes now, tomorrow it will expose the data within as well as the applications, right? So how do we handle such an issue? That issue could be handled by, having software composition analysis to see what is the software composite of, right? What are the whether it is what are the dependencies allotted to it, and comparing the declared dependencies against national vulnerability databases, and dynamically monitor every commit and also against the vulnerabilities, and also checking the susceptibility analysis, such as whether this vulnerability, whatever we are seeing, has been already used. What is the risk of it? Right? These are the elements which need to be validated. So there are tools to do that for software composition analysis, and that's important for validating this third party and as well as the open source libraries usage. So that's how we can reduce the risk. I think, as I said, I think it's important to get the innovation going. We find how to manage the risk by tools like this.
Yes, very good points. Very good points. Yes. I think one of the other areas that we've seen people focusing on more too is where the development tool sets themselves are maybe not as mature. So when the IDE support is not as good, or where the where static analysis tooling or whatever might not be as strong to find bugs in the code, including maybe the library code, right? We're seeing a greater emphasis on other kinds of testing. So perhaps fuzzing or some other kinds of testing, right, to catch these bugs, right? Because again, if you're in a very mature language environment, you'll have really strong tooling. You'll be able to catch lots of bugs. I'll just use again the example of Java, right, versus Python, right? So the tooling in Java is very mature. All kinds of things will find bugs for you, right? But the tooling in Python, although it's improving, or something like Go, again, because it's improving, but the support just isn't as strong, right? So you've got to focus maybe more on some fundamentals and look for API fuzzing, for example, or even just strong code reviews, manual code reviews or something to find these kinds of things, right? As well as the risks in all of the libraries, as you pointed out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a valid point. I think a lot of the serverless codes are actually based on Python or are JSON-based scripts, etc., for which you don't have any database to tell you these are the unsafe code practices, because they are not developed. They are not developed yet because these are very modern, right? So I agree on this aspect of, I think, the secure code reviews, which is a standard old practice that need to be done for these, what you can say, very critical, engaging applications. So majority, I think we observe, the like CloudFormation templates, what we earlier spoke about, are relying on a serverless script, which is again might be buggy. How can we handle that?
Right.
So those are the things which we need to manage.
Right, exactly. Okay, all right, well, let's go to our next part. We specifically looked at adoption of different kinds of technical practices, let's call them DevOps practices, that are around enabling and supporting velocity. And these are things like practices like automated builds and deployment, and continuous integration and continuous delivery. You think of them as foundational or enabling practices, right? Once those are in place, the team can move faster and more predictably, which is good for the engineering teams, right? But they also provide a control plane for the security team and the compliance teams, because once teams have adopted certain amount of automation and are using that consistently, you now have a point where you can go to look for and add tests and reviews and these kinds of things and gating to improve your security and compliance posture. So based on that, we know that cloud native applications are being built faster to scale more effectively. And they rely heavily on automation, including things like these practices like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and whatnot. How can security tooling be effectively integrated into these workflows, these native workflows?
So this question is tricky, if the question is about how do you integrate security tools into CI/CD pipeline, it's easy to answer. I'll tell you a technical solution saying, okay, go ahead and integrate SAST and DEST and some SCA, which is something which you do it, and also integrate service management tools, so you manage the remediation. So that's done, right? However, the question here is, about effective implementation of DevSecOps on cloud, right? So that is the key, the effectiveness, right? The complex picture here is the topic is around the effectiveness, and that includes various stakeholders. And we need to remember that detecting vulnerabilities is just half of the job, right? Most important activity is actually to fix that, right? How do you do that? And also continue to do that, continue to reduce that vulnerabilities and fixing it. So which means empowering the developers to help them identify the gaps early in the life cycle and address them quickly to fix these detected issues, right? That's the key, right? Second is security team also has to do, I mean, it's not about hand-holding developers. Instead, figure out that the findings what are going are actually very less number of false positives, and also offering effective recommendations so that the developers can make it faster. So that's another thing. It's actually hand in hand job to make it effective, right? So the top way to handle this integration effective is actually building security champions within the developer community who will actually champion the security cause and train the developers and ensure that the code is developed securely, which is actually speaking that what we can say, the risk is addressed at the source itself, right? Before the third party like security comes and reviews, the team actually themselves identify and fix it. That's the best method to handle. That's how we can have an effective DevSecOps.
Absolutely agree. That's a very important point. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here again is for the security and compliance teams to look at as the teams automate things, as they adopt new practices, right? And in order to try to move faster. So something like continuous integration, continuous delivery. The security teams and compliance teams should be looking at that and saying, okay, how does that help us perform our work, right? How does that help us manage risk and improve compliance with policy? And if you think about something like continuous builds and automated deployment, the audit trails and the opportunity to add even some basic checking into these workflows provides a very powerful tool, right? And this is something that I've spent a lot of time working on with auditors. Once you can show them that the changes are all being done in this consistent and automated fashion, and that these tests are being performed, that here's the audit trail, that these changes were made you can prove that these changes were checked in through version control. So starting from version control and working all your way up through all these different steps, you not only have something that gives you more assurance and more confidence, but you have a very solid evidence for any kind of audits and compliance issues and stuff, right? And obviously, both of us coming from financial backgrounds, we know how important that is, right? And this is something that you don't have to, as a security and compliance team member, you don't have to impose on the team, on the engineering teams. They're actually doing this. They're giving this to you, right? This is by automating these things and you understanding how they work and knowing where the audit trails are, you get this for free. It's so encourage them to automate and go faster, because if they automate and go faster, your job gets easier. This is the irony, right? I know that, right? It's funny, back in, I know at a certain point, people wanted to push back and say, hey, no, this is too much. Now you realize, no, once you do it properly, this is better, right?
Agree. Yep. There are several innovative methods of this security champions are coming in. Some of them, the hackathons, actually. Hackathon within the company. We're actually giving the developers to go ahead and hack their own applications for hacking into the application. Practically, the hacking happens by the developers themselves to find the findings and then showcase how many findings they can do. And the other guy have to go and fix it. Based on that, they get these points and then they win awards. So this is another way of actually building the training and, what we can say, bring that practice into play. That's something a lot of organizations have started. I think, to me, I think these are really an interesting way to handle it. Not just that, I think that improves the effectiveness of the code itself, the quality of the code.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. You're right. I think as the developers start to take on that role or more thoughtfulness about it, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose even things like bug bounties, right? Once you, if you get programs like that running, I know they're very difficult to set up properly, right? But if they're running, you're going to get that constant feedback on your code, right? And if you can get your developers to be thoughtful about that, that can be a very powerful feedback loop again as well, right?
Agree, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to also look at the barriers and enablers to security practices today and to secure DevOps, right? So security at velocity, security at code. One of the things we found from the organizations we surveyed is that most of the major challenges to success were organizational, not technical. Now I know that we focus a lot because we're as engineers, we focus a lot on the technical side, right? On the tooling, on the training, on the practices. But in terms of getting overall success, most organizations are dealing with larger issues that are structural issues, right? Or cultural issues. So things like organizational silos. Still fighting for budget. Obviously, everybody's going to fight for budget all the time. That's not a surprise. Shortage of security skills and security training, and the counter to that, which is shortage of cloud skills for both engineering and for security people, right? Finding people that know security and know cloud is pretty difficult, like cloud architecture and stuff is very difficult, right? And again, things like continuously changing requirements and lack of buy-in at different levels, right? So most of the challenges tend to be, are seen to be more organizational. And the success factors, including things like training engineers on cloud and DevSecOps concepts, right? So making sure that security people understand the cloud, that engineers understand the cloud, that engineers understand security, all these different things, right? There's a lot of learning curves involved, improving communications, securing buy-in. And we know that this can be driven from top down or bottom up. So we wanted to ask you, Satya, as organizations are shifting workloads into all these complex cloud environments, in your experience, right, working with different organizations, what have been the largest barriers and the most significant success factors? What are the top 5 things that you've found in your experience? And yeah.
I think, Jim, I think I strongly support what the findings you have got. I guess it's close to what I have in my list, and probably I'll just concur with your comments, but add supporting evidences or supporting comments so that it connects back to your analysis report. I think it's very well done. Thank you for that. Firstly, let me start with this, right? I think you have very well said, right? It's, first and foremost, most of the problems are related to people than the tools. Tools are means to receive the end, and people are I can say people are the one who decide whether to use the tool or not use the tool, or use it in a different way, not it's expected to, right? So that is what it is all about, right? So it's all about the tool. So let's speak about, I'm going to just talk about problem by problem and immediately the solution so that it's easy to narrate, right? The first one, I think I agree with you. The top line item is silos. Silos between the 3 parties involved. I think there are more parties, but let's speak about 3 parties here: development, security, and operations. These silos are formed long before, right? It's not new. However, it is getting better today because DevOps is something which is established. They're working hand in hand already because DevOps pipeline is already working. So now Sec comes in and stand in between, right? So is this a third wheel or actually an oil to run this cycle, right? That's something we need to establish. So how do we handle this? The point here is the reason why we are here or why this silos exist is because each department has its own goal, its own roles and responsibilities. And there is no common thread which is connecting to security. Once everybody understands security is a common thread and that need to be included and it's important, that is when there's a common connection and then there's a common talk and common language. That's not happening. That's why this silos exist, right? So if once you don't have it, what happens here is it's like everybody's pulling in their own direction and the objectives are not achieved, right? That's the first part. So how do we convert this issue into success? How can you manage it? I think this could be managed, as I said, there should be a single thread connecting. There is a common goal called security and embedding security into the pipeline and achieving that, the cost of non-compliance or cost of not losing our own, what we can say, worth of the company. So all whatever the bad image or whatever, so all those things are the most important things. So that could be established when the stakeholders buy-in has been received at the early stages and they agreed on, all the three parties agreed on common goals, KPIs, and the resources as well. Okay? There's always this resource issue. You know what? I have this discussion happens. Developer says, you know what? I have the release cycle I need to work on. I can't work on this finding. I'll look into it once my release is over. So once the release is over, this issue is actually within that code, and it actually leads to an exposure. That is something not fixed immediately. So that could be handled when you have a strategical answer, right? That's the point number one. So coming to the second one, I think you mentioned the funds, right? To me, I think I change it as money and management support. These two, money and management support, not just money, but management support also. So I think this is connected to the problem number one. So you can actually pull all these three groups in one only when there is a management sitting there and tell them, guys, all of you have to see this. This is the very important aspect for me, and you should look into it. So that can only happen when the leadership understands the importance of security. I don't say the leadership don't understand, but their priorities are always different, right? I'm not saying that they don't know, they know it very well. They always have the different priorities. I think more than the training to the developers and the other people, it's important to train the leaders about what is happening in the world, what is the exposure. In case you don't do, what will be the exposure to your organization, what will happen? Because they're not aware. Their priorities are about business, delivery, and timelines. They're not aware about it. So I think that increasing the awareness in the leadership is something that could bring the management onto this common thread what we are speaking about. So that's a solution which we need to work on. And then second aspect is once the management is invested into the idea itself, then you get the budgets, right? So budgets is actually all in the hands of the mind first. If you haven't thought about it, then why do you actually invest in it, right? So that's the point. I think it's all about the management support that you need to get, right? So the trainings could be all about, you do not need to go into saying that this many vulnerabilities or this many bugs, etc. Then they will be really like fired up. They don't even hear you. So what you need to go on, or a security professional need to speak about is about how a data breach like Equifax impacted, or the latest impacts on the Uber or Google. So those are the stories you need to speak about, and speak about the data breaches, case studies, and explain how it impacts the image and the share value. So that is when you get the money and management support. Yeah.
Yes, that's very good. Very good points. Yes, and I know that you've got a certain level of achieved a certain level of success when your CEO calls you, wakes you up, and asks you about some kind of problem that he's just heard about or she's just heard about in the news, or from one of his or her colleagues, right? And that's happened to me in the past, right? Where somebody, next thing you know, that some one of these major high-profile breaches, I think it's difficult for now for senior managers to not be aware of them, right? There's the bad guys are helping, I guess, the good guys get more attention and more management support. So I guess maybe we can thank them for that.
Agreed.
That's,
yeah.
yeah, it's certainly getting to the point where it's got to the board level, right? When everybody on the board is aware of a problem and wants to know what you're doing about it, it makes your job a little easier, right?
Agreed.
It's harder now. It's difficult because you better do something about it, but at least you got support.
I agree, absolutely. So problem number three is actually, I think you mentioned the shortage of application security skills in developers and security professionals. I think that's a training part. I think that's a no-brainer. I think we need to do that and internally uplift. And there is a fourth one, which is about continuously changing requirements and priority. So considering that the development is actually agile and it's a velocity development, so how you will solve it is actually having, I think earlier we spoke about integrated security directly within the pipeline,
Right.
and also actually highlighting key vulnerabilities while, for example, if the code is so small, you don't have time to actually to test it. This is the comment you always observe in the delivery. Like, you know what, I'm writing this much of code and I need to give you so much of time for testing. I think the best thing is to actually automate the testing itself in the code, so the developers can fix it in the list before it goes to the release, and also managing it within the life cycle itself, actually using some kind of monitoring mechanisms or real-time application security monitoring. These are the things with which you can actually manage the continuously changing requirement. I think the fifth one is connected to the last one, which is about lack of buy-in from different stakeholders. This is connecting to the point what we just mentioned, money and management. I think when we have the support from money and management, and then also connected back to the leadership and the goals and the objectives, I think we'll be able to get the buy-in among the stakeholders. So that's my fifth one. Back to you.
Oh, those are good. Your point about continuously reacting and recognizing continuously changing priorities and requirements, I think that's particularly key now for security professionals today, right? Because if the engineering organizations are moving iteratively and incrementally, right, and they're trying to respond to change very quickly, they're doing, especially in early stages, they're pivoting, right? They're doing these tests and then finding out that something isn't going to work and they're going a different direction. It's very hard for you to take a structured approach to understanding and managing risk, right? So as you point out, if you can push or encourage more of the security testing practices onto the engineering teams, they can, as they're pivoting and iterating, they can be doing some more of that work, right? But I think it's also important for security professionals to be trying to become a little bit more feedback-based, a bit more iterative, right? And think, okay, I'm not going to try to manage all the risks top down, put everything inside a box. I need to be able to try things, be a bit more experimental, be a bit more iterative, try to maybe introduce some new practices and see what happens in a certain case, and then use that as a learning opportunity. As you said, try to manage the bigger risks, right, as quickly as possible, and be able to respond to the changing risk. Because I think having that mindset and that agility not only allows you to be more responsive to what's changing within your own organization, your own engineering organization, but it also allows you, it also enables you to be more responsive to changing threat landscape too, right? If you're more iterative, if you're saying, oh, let's find out about this and respond to this, as risks start to change or as threats start to change, you can you're more prepared to deal with that too, right? And I think that that will help, right? And that automation and leveraging the engineering team's automation and tooling, right? And I think our last question is more of a wrap-up question in this case. So we looked at this as, and this is a chance just to talk about whatever you want to, Satya, right? But we looked at this as again, security is changing, it's becoming more agile, it's becoming more code-based. Operations is changing, becoming more agile, becoming more code-based, and obviously development's becoming more agile. All these things are working together. So what does this mean to security professionals? What does it mean to their priorities? And what else do you want to talk about that you think is important point to raise and discuss here.
Sure. So see the one of the aspect which I want to mention here, which is not covered in so far, is like most organizations, right? Not most, sorry, some organizations. Let me use word some organizations try to cover up security in secrecy. They don't want to show up the findings. They cover it up. When the auditor comes, everything is clean and they got certified, complied, done, right? So this kind of culture actually increases the secrecy and fear. And also a lot of vulnerabilities are under the carpet. They will be visible only when something happens, something big happens, right? I'm not saying the maturity is increasing in organizations. Yes, I agree. There are few organizations continue to do this, which is something as a completely under worst case scenario I'm going with. And I'll tell you one best example as well, right, to finish with. The best example, what I like, this personal experience, nothing from anybody else. According to me, actually, Netflix, right? It uses security as a sunshine, right? So I like the principle of this chaos engineering by Netflix, right? It sounds dangerous, right? Netflix wears that intentionally harming systems to discover bigger bugs. Do that so you actually identify that early in the stage and fix it, right? They believe running these chaos experiments directly on the production system in a controlled manner, you can improve your system availability because you are identifying and eliminating problems before they manifest as an outage in the later stage, right? That's actually a great theory, right? I mean, I'm still speaking it as a theory because not many people have practiced it, but that's one thing which I think slowly people should adopt to in future, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, I don't know when. I think that is what people should adopt when they are moving into cloud, right? Because you are actually thousands of applications are being developed and deployed at a scale. For example, Netflix is concerned. Maybe the organizations also will be in that stage sooner or later. Then how are you going to handle it? Unless you actually proactively validate and test, right? I know this is the proactive approach and I think much before it actually practiced, but it's a great theory to follow, right? And it's a hard sell for corporate executives where we are still selling, as I told the other example, right? It's very difficult. It's a huge culture shift to happen, but that's something which will actually bring the proactiveness, like the cyber war games people are playing to actually identify vulnerabilities, identifying the gaps, identify the weakness first, so that they can fix it. So that is something which I believe is something prospective I'm looking to see whenever it happens. And then coming to the ground, coming to the practical, simple solution. So what is the future immediately is actually, we all know that security is not a one-time activity. It's a continuous process and it requires embedding security within the code. While the infrastructure is actually built as a code, the security also need to be built into the code. I think that need to be done and practiced. I think now we saw very few people actually started automating itself. Once that is done, then you slowly actually embed the security also into it. So that's the best way to do it. I think to close it, right, as simple as building brake is essential when you are designing a fast car. To accelerate the velocity of application development, security controls need to be embedded. I think with that, I close. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think that's a very good place to close. I don't believe we have any questions, right, Carol? So no, here we go. I'll pass it back to you to finish off.
Well, that's correct. I don't see any questions at this time. So thank you so much, Jim and Satya, for your great presentation, and to Micro Focus for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. So I was bringing over to the acknowledgements here. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.